Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe, but there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, on a beautiful December the 30th, 2019. Brando Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Oh, Charlton, we're flabbergasted down here. We've gotten through the college football semifinal playoffs. The NFL season has ended. We got New Year's Bowl games coming up, and really, do they mean anything anymore?
It's almost like at the Smorgasbord restaurant. The first meal was good. The fourth meal might make it too full. It's all fair, love, and war. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac leaders, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Also, Big C Sports, powered by Google. And Alexa, just say Google, or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our national sponsors on podcast and TV. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, also Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate the growth with Big C Sports. And I want to just acknowledge iHeartRadio, acknowledge Big C Sports, one of the top podcasts in the universe. Thank you for their help and also their support. Big C, I want to just make sure as we come up to, I guess you could say, New Year's Day Eve, or Eve, we have just a couple of more days left in 2019. But for people needing help, we always pay homage to our military veterans. National Suicide Hotline number 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, it's amazing that 363 days has slipped past us thus far in 2019, and it's almost coming to an end. But those 363 days, Charlton, are every day for an American veteran who goes out and struggles, trying to adapt and adjust to realization of American society after doing their tours of duty.
Yeah.
And suicide has become such a horrific disease, Charlton, in America, and it's afflicting some 20 veterans a day that we're losing to that horrific disease.
Wow.
The National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is there, Charlton, hopefully to lend a hand and an ear to those struggling veterans who need some support, who need someone to talk to. After leaving their active duty, Charlton, that brother and sisterhood that they have within the military ranks is gone. They're void of that, and they don't have that support base to lean on. And suicide, unfortunately, has taken so many through depression and other plights that they've been living through life, Charlton. And not only our military veterans, but our everyday people in America, especially our youth, who are succumbing to this. Minority youth succumbing to suicide at a record pace in America, Charlton. As we talk about this country, and we have our administration talking about making this country great again, he needs to find a way to make suicide go away in this country and not so much boast about himself and what he's doing, but what can he do to stem the tide of this horrific disease? The National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, is there to help in some ways, but we need more from our government, from our private citizens, in ways to help our veterans and everyday layman person to stem the suicide in this country, Charlton. But the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is one of those that starts it.
It's one of those that starts it, and we'll always make sure that we are part of that too. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255, and get some help. You know, as we get into this holiday that everybody's being celebratory and looking at what happened in the past year, what do they want better for the new year? But you mentioned something that I want to talk about before we get into sports, because our country is so much like those smorgasbords. We can get too much sports if we don't balance our plate, Big C. And when I also read that African Americans are more prone to need to call to get some help psychologically. And because we're so focused on who won the game, what was the score, how big, tall, and fast somebody is, we hear that being said all the time. But when 1 in 6 kids go to bed hungry, that's including mainstream. We know the white wealth is more than black wealth because of how slavery unfairly developed white society, and even laws that disenfranchise black Americans from getting a home loan or any kind of loan. So you have to be obtuse not to know that's going on. But I would like to just make sure that, especially in the African American community, you see, why has the opioid crisis for white American kids gotten so much notice, but when it comes to black children harming themselves, it's gotten less notice? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you spoke about what it is. It's white America using opioids. And they don't imprison those people, Charlton, for using opioids. Who creates the opioids? The pharmaceutical companies. They make billions of dollars a year on the exploitations of human citizens, Charlton. Not just in America, but around the world. Opioids are something that are produced in a laboratory, and they're profited. They're traded on the stock market, Charlton. So there's been no sensibility as far as eliminating the opioid crisis. It can be talked about.
Yeah.
Will it be relegated to something else? No, Charlton, because you're not going to cut out the profits of Big Pharma in America, and they're big donors to all their political constituents.
Yeah.
That is the reason why it gets the attention that it does, Charlton. But when you talk about if that was in the African-American community like heroin was in the 40s and 50s, Charlton,
yeah,
when it was pushed in there by mainstream, it would be no talk about, heroin abuse, Charlton. But since it hit mainstream society with the opioid addiction, and there's hundreds of opioid deaths every day from overdose in America, Charlton,
yeah,
now it's striking home. It's hitting people who look like the people who talk about it. And that's the reason why it's so relevant. But as we talk about marijuana use in America, Charlton, and other drug use in America,
yeah,
it doesn't get the same stigma as opioid addiction and overdose and death in America, Charlton, because it's mainly a white disease.
Yeah. I just hope that as I was reading about the suicide hotline too, and just studying about so many kids of color that oftentimes are just pushed aside, marginalized, not getting the help that is out there to get help. But sometimes people, I don't know if it's a stigma or what it is, but it was heartbreaking to read some of those studies about how more difficult it is for people of color. But I want to add something too, because we talked about this, we've been talking about it for 5 years now since doing Big C Sports, and now I hear the legislation passed in California that you can no longer expel kids that are considered troubled kids or kids that act up or the attention deficit disorder. Oftentimes when they were black kids, white teachers would just have them expelled from the school. And there's a study that people can Google this, that black kids are 10 times more likely than a white kid to be expelled for what's exhibiting, troubled behavior in an elementary school. And once you get into that class where they dispel you for bad behavior, quote unquote bad behavior, you are actually you're marked all the way into your high school years. So they keep a number on you the same way they track GPA. Well, now it's illegal in California to expel a kid because of what they call abnormal behavior. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the whole thing about education is keeping kids in school.
Yeah.
If they're not in school, then what do they do with that alternate time, Charlton? Education is a very short window in free education through kindergarten through 12th grade.
Yeah.
And to expel kids, then all of a sudden you're constantly putting that kid behind. You're telling that kid that they really don't matter in society. But if that kid is a great athlete, Charlton, you'll keep them in school at all costs.
Oh, yeah.
Regardless of the trouble that they get in. We've seen that over the decades. I saw that when I was in high school. We had troubled kids when I was in high school, but they were great athletes, and they were kept in school.
Yeah.
So as long as there's the exploitation for benefit of gain from the university or institution, you will keep a kid in school. We see that in colleges still.
Yeah.
As kids get, kicked off colleges team, they will get accepted on another team because they're great athletes and they're financially beneficial to that institution.
Yeah.
But you can't marginalize kids because of their color. Everyone doesn't come from that same background. You talked about kids going to bed hungry in America. You go to bed hungry, you're not going to come to school with a great attitude, because normally by the time you arrive at school, you're hungry also.
Always,
and so if you're hungry, you're going to be displaced mentally. And so things will become very agitated in your life. And so they have to understand that when we think about, as our administration talking about this country doing as great as it's ever been at any time, they've never talked about the hungry kids in this country.
I know.
20% of American school-aged children are hungry every day when they go to school.
Yeah.
20%. And when you think about that you haven't had breakfast prior to coming to school, and most likely haven't had dinner,
right,
that's going to make you an agitated child in the school system.
Yeah, and it's hard to learn when your belly is growling. And one more thing I'll add on to that, because I know people want to talk about sports, and when I watch other programs, I'm not knocking anybody, but I think we do a disservice when we act like we're so dumb that all we can do is, Big C, who won the game? Did you see how big and fast that guy was? And when we hear about African-American kids are prone to the same kind of depression that mainstream kids are, but there's no national push on how we end it. But the president will talk about the opioid problem because it affects white kids. But I want to make sure that people know that. But this new law that was passed that makes it illegal to expel kids on behavior, I think that's so important, because oftentimes those kids are people of color, and they're expelled by white school teachers that may just say, hey, get rid of them or whatever. And I've heard enough of that garbage. So I want to say just congratulations for that, especially going into the new year. Big C, I know there's so much to cover in sports, so many games I want to get your opinion on. Some of the College Bowl games, Military Bowl, North Carolina 55-13 over Temple. Good job, Mac Brown. Michigan State with a 27-21 win over Wake Forest. And then the game that kind of united two old souls, Big T, two old ships passing in the middle of the night, Texas A&M and Oklahoma State. It was 24-21 for Texas A&M, and they finally get a marquee win. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it was a desperate need for Jimbo Fisher, Charlton, to beat a ranked team. You know, he lost all of those teams that were ranked going into this bowl season. He struggled since being at Texas A&M, getting that huge contract, trying to rebuild this program, saying Kevin Sumlin had taken it as far as it could. But when you look at him not having a signature win on his season yet since being here at Texas A&M, it was very important for him to end this season at 8-5, winning a bowl game.
You know, Sumlin had the win over when they had beaten, I believe they had beaten Alabama. You know, Fisher hasn't gotten that type of marquee win, Big C. Their seminal win has been beating the Oklahoma State Cowboys, but he got the $75 million anyway. I'm sure his banking accounts appreciate it. A game that I feel like is really a slap in the face to a lot of the issues that have plagued Southern California, USC Trojans. What a proud organization they've been over the years, going back to John McKay and all the way to Pete Carroll, and then now Clay Helton, and you know, coaches in between. Think about some of the great players, Mike Garrett, O.J. Simpson. You think about all the great players, Junior Seau that played there, Reggie Bush, you know, Matt Leinart, Ronnie Lott, Marcus Allen, so many of them, Big C. But they lost 49-24 in the Holiday Bowl to Iowa, and this was after Clay Helton was given, you know, the thumb of approval, and I'm sure the USC administration also saw Ed Orgeron trying to run the score up on Oklahoma down there in the South, Big C, and they had that guy in the helm. They had that guy, and he said he was heartbroken not to keep the job at USC. But I want to get your perspective from a Southern guy looking out here at the West Coast, and when Iowa comes in to San Diego, your own recruiting ground, and doubled you up 49-24, Big C, that's not good for the USC administration. Where do they go from here? I want to get your thoughts before I ask you the second question.
Well, administration has nothing to do with productivity of players on the field. When you're outmanned by Iowa, you got to think that Iowa is a very solid program in the Big Ten. You got to look at the competition that they have. That Big Ten schedule is much tougher than that Pac-12 schedule. And when you think about the opponents that they play, Iowa played top 10 opponents throughout the year. You think about teams that were on their schedule. Yeah. Ohio State, which was in the national championship race. Wisconsin, who's going to be in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Penn State. These are the teams that are in that conference. You can't look at the Pac-12 and say, okay, we have 5 teams that are in the top 15 in the country. The Big Ten can do that.
Yeah.
So when you think about Iowa coming in to San Diego beating up on USC, this was a much more physical team, and you're underrating the talent of Iowa.
So if you're Southern California and you're in the heart of 20 million people, and I heard Reggie Bush was talking about this too, and I know Reggie Bush has his own thoughts about USC. He went there, but they took away his Heisman Trophy, and I know you always ask, why are people leaving the Pac-12 and going elsewhere? And sometimes you open up a gift and you gotta keep pulling through layers of paper and wrapping before you see what's on the inside of it. And when I heard him make a statement on television, I said, you know what? That's also part of the problem. They made him give back the Heisman Trophy on a program where a lot of people have shenanigans going on, but Pete Carroll knew how to win, and knowing how to win meant that he was acting like a lot of other programs around the country, and they tried to clean that up, and now they're struggling to keep up. But at some point in time, when Reggie Bush even said they were out-coached, how does USC look at the fact they had Ed Orgeron, or is that too simplistic, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's simplistic, Charles. It's not being out-coached, it's being outplayed. Coaches can only give you the X's and O's, all right? It's up to the players whether they want to execute or not. You keep saying that players are leaving Southern California. What does USC have that's attractive? Back in the heyday, it was like everybody else, Charlton, where you had a grandstand stadium, you had a massive television audience because you played on nationally broadcast games. But now players, you have to understand, we're in an age where players want instant gratification.
Yeah.
They want to be able to walk out of their dorm and see the stadium. They want to walk into a locker room that's on campus. They want to be able to interact with a student body that can walk to the game, Charlton. Everybody's dealing with social media now.
Yeah.
When you look at the teams that played in the semifinals for the national championship, Charlton, all of those teams, the smallest stadium any one of those teams have is 88,000, and that's on campus. 88,000 seats on campus. What Pac-10 team can compete with that? Even the Pac-12 championship that only had 15,000 participants. You look at USC, they are in Los Angeles. They couldn't even fill up half the stadium in San Diego. Couldn't be more than a 2 or 3 hour drive between those cities.
Yeah.
Iowa brought just as many people from Iowa City, aimed at Iowa City as USC did.
Yeah.
They have an on-campus facility. They expanded their stadium a couple of years ago. One of the more, picturesque, intimate settings in college football. So when you think about the attraction, and they get the best of their area plus other kids that come in.
Yeah.
So Iowa can recruit nationally, but they get all the kids in their local area to come to their university. USC struggles with that, Charlton. What's the big appeal for USC? You can talk about the heyday, going back to John McKay. You can go back to Pete Carroll and John Robinson.
Yeah.
Those coaches, Charlton. But what's the big appeal now on a national scale that USC can present that the top 10 teams in the country can't offer?
Yeah, I still think when you're in the number 2 media market, it is easy to build on. But
what does an 18-year-old know about media? Everybody has social media. You talk about the handheld devices all the time.
Yeah.
That everybody's streaming and watching stuff on that. Kids don't watch TV. They don't know anything about what's the number 1 market. They don't know anything about the number 12 market. They don't know anything about the number 27 market. You tell me what market Clemson, South Carolina is. It can't even be in the top 100 when you talk about media. You talk about Columbus, Ohio. I know it's not in the top 25.
Right.
I know about Alabama, wherever that school is.
Tuscaloosa.
It can't be in the top 50 or 100 where the University of Alabama is.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the teams in the national championship, it's not about media market because kids don't watch TV now. They're all on their phone.
Yeah.
They have the media in their hand.
Well, that's very interesting. Well, even in drawing that conclusion, Orgeron, I think he was 6-2 at USC at the time that he took over the position. So it's not like he was undefeated at USC. So that part is not just coaching. There's a lot of things.
He was 6-2 when he took over at LSU.
At LSU too, and they gave him a chance to build. But we'll see what Clay Helton can do with the program. I still think it's a top place to land for a high school kid looking for a college. Air Force with the win over Washington State, 31-21. We had Penn State with another Big Ten win, 53-39 over Memphis. Memphis was ranked number 17. So Penn State, when I was telling you about programs that could play when they do expand the college playoff system, that's going to happen in the next 5 years because there's too much money to turn away if you don't do it. Penn State put on a nice showing for also a team that was not even in the Big Ten Conference Championship. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, no, they weren't in. But if you look at Penn State, 2 of the last 3 bowl games they've had, Charlton, they've been in the 50-point range.
Yeah.
But in the expansion of college football, as we talked about the other day, how are you going to handle that? What days is it going to be played on? How are you going to bracket it out? We already have the conference championship games. You have to eliminate the conference championship games to expand college football playoffs. So where is that going to put everybody when it comes down to the conference championship games? You got 10 teams already playing what is called a college football playoff.
Yeah.
So which one of those teams do you spend, on? Do you leave it at 10? Do you go to 12? Do you go to 16? But New Year's Day right now is in jeopardy because of the college football playoffs. It's 2 days away. What's exciting about New Year's Day bowl games now that we've had the semifinal games over this past weekend?
Yeah, that's a good point. I still think that we're a society that you just take – all that's going to add is one more week to college football, and I think they're going to do it just like they expanded from 78 when the Alt started it in Division II. It's not going to go down. Just my opinion. Notre Dame with a 33-9 win over Iowa State. That was the first time they had ever played Iowa State. I did not know that. You would think they would have played before. Now I want to get into the Peach Bowl with Oklahoma and LSU, and then I'll touch on the Fiesta Bowl and get your thoughts. Oklahoma, as you mentioned, some players were already missing going into that game. Oklahoma likes to give up 50 points for the championship games, it seems. And going way back to when they lost the Orange Bowl to USC, they lost 55-19. It's like their better years was under Barry Switzer, whether they're coaching or program or whatever it is. But LSU, 63-28 over Oklahoma. I just felt that was one of those once-in-a-lifetime games where Oklahoma still scored about as much points as they scored in the Big 12 championship game against Baylor, but they lost 63-28. I don't know the answer for why that happens. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the tide of that game changed early, Charlton, where when you had a non-pass interference call against LSU, against the Oklahoma receiver, where he grabbed him and spun around. The ball still hit the receiver in the leg as he was still being drugged to the ground. So it was a very catchable ball. But the momentum and the emotion of the game changed at that point. Also, Oklahoma dropped 3 touchdown passes.
Yeah.
So if you take those 4 plays, that's 28 points that Oklahoma left on the field, even though they even missed the field goal. I won't even count the field goal because that was on the drive when the non-interference call wasn't made.
Yeah.
So you think about those 28 points. Would it have been a different outcome? Maybe not. I think LSU was going to win the game regardless. But it would have been a better showing for Oklahoma. They came into this game without any pass rush. Joe Burrow had between 5 and 8 seconds every time he dropped back to throw a pass, Charlton. This kid was unflustered in the pocket.
Yeah.
And you think about the talent across the board. This is nothing new for LSU. They've had this talent for decades, offensively and defensively. Now they have a quarterback and who gets all the accolades, but it's been about the offensive coordinator who put in a game plan and a system to exploit the talents of the young quarterback, Charlton, who won the Heisman and undoubtedly could be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL.
Yeah.
When you look at a team that can score at will, this is a rarity that we've seen in college football or any level of football. And it's been a pleasure to watch. This is a once-in-a-generational team that LSU has. They do everything right.
Well, they did everything right that night. I mean, when I watched Burrow get out of the pocket, there was one play that was so amazing. He reminded me of Russell Wilson, where he scrambled to the sideline. He was about a foot from being out of bounds, and then threw about a 35-yard pass to his receiver, who caught it also about a foot from out of bounds. So very accurate. Even when on the move, I thought defensively, LSU was able to play a lot of man-to-man, and they didn't have to worry about zone. They could bump and run with Oklahoma, and it seemed like Oklahoma wasn't ready for that. Just an incredible game, a display by LSU. Hard to see why anybody can beat them going forward, even if they have a less game against Clemson. So congratulations to the LSU Tigers, and now they get to go and play their national championship game down in New Orleans, Louisiana, which the setting reminds me of what USC faced back in 2005 Rose Bowl when they had to play their national championship game against Texas coming in. USC was the favorite. They were both ranked number 1 and 2 in the country. And it would look like an easy runaway for USC back in the first half. And then, Texas came on and won the game in the final 20 seconds. But I didn't think I'd ever seen a game better than that until I saw Clemson and Ohio State. But give me your feeling before we get in there. And I want to get your thoughts on, you always talk about at least in Major League Baseball, the road team has fewer distractions. Would you say that's also fair for college football, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, every game is a road game when you look at the playoffs in college football. Yes, this game is in New Orleans, but it's still a road game for LSU. They play in Baton Rouge, which is an hour or so away from New Orleans. So they're not going to have the distraction of being in the city. You also have to look at it from the LSU perspective. Those kids are used to having 100,000-plus people at every home game that they play. You're not going to get that many in the Superdome. But they've been in big games every game that they play. You think about LSU. This is the first team in college football history to beat 6 top 10 football teams in a season.
Yeah.
And if they beat Clemson, it will be 7. First time in history. So when you talk about the greatest team ever in one season, if they win the national championship, it would go down as LSU.
Yeah.
But we got to also give Clemson a lot of consideration in this game. They're 29 straight victories, Charlton. This is a team that has played through adversity. They've played everybody that's come up. Everybody said, well, they've played nobody in their schedule. Damn, for 29 games, they beat everybody on their schedule.
Yep.
What Clemson remind me of is a cockroach. You can't kill him. You just keep stomping and stomping, and every time you turn around, he's moving again.
Yeah.
That's what Clemson did to Ohio State.
Yeah.
Ohio State was a team that could not capitalize on being in the red zone. So when people say that Clemson hasn't played anybody, they shut down Ohio State on 3 drives in the first half in the red zone. If not for J.K. Dobbs' long touchdown run, it may have been 4 times they shut them down in the first half in the red zone because Clemson had an answer for what Ohio State was doing offensively. That wasn't luck on Clemson's behalf. This is a team that's been there before. 3 out of the last 4 national championship games, now 4 out of the last 5, Charlton, they participated in. So when you have a coach that can prepare you like Dabo Swinney, knows what to do in the big games, he studies his opponents, he's a knowledgeable aficionado at head coach, he relegates the duties to his assistants, and they've been there before. So they're not awestruck or anything when it comes to this game. They're in the same position they were last year when they went and played Alabama with a true freshman quarterback. Everybody said Alabama would run through Clemson. Clemson said, we're running through Alabama.
Right.
This could be the greatest shootout ever in a national championship game.
Give me your thoughts on it was 29-23 Clemson over Ohio State. Again, number 3 team over number 2, if you believe. However the musical chairs goes into ranking teams. Could have gone either way. In fact, Ohio State, I thought they were going to win that game, but the receiver broke off his route, and those things happen. They're college kids. But that, irrespective of how Clemson won that game, that was a game that Ohio State, and I'm going to get your opinion, because Coach Day said the same thing. That was a catch and fumble. You had possession of the ball right around the 20-yard line, the Clemson receiver. He actually took 5 steps before the ball came out. All you need is 1-2 for a reception. And that was overturned. That would have given Ohio State more points too. But Ohio State, first I want to get your thoughts on that, Big C. Go right ahead.
Well, Charlton, we see that in every game where officials are blowing calls.
Yeah.
You saw it last night in the Seattle-San Francisco
in
game
the end zone,
where the officials blew the call.
Yeah.
It goes back to what I said. Officials should have only the time that's on a play clock to make a decision on a challenge call.
Yeah.
You should not have 2 and 3 minutes. You got 40 seconds, just like you're going to have on the play clock, to make the decision. You're going to get there under the hood. You're going to look.
Yeah.
We saw that it changed the tide of the LSU-Oklahoma game, Charlton. It changed the tide of the Clemson-Ohio State game.
Yeah.
But this is what officiating has been throughout the year, whether it's college, high school, or professional.
Yeah.
Egregious calls, mistakes that are being made that everyone sees that are watching on television through replay.
Yep.
And what are the officials looking at? Are they looking at the same replays that everybody at home is looking at?
I don't know what they're
seeing. So as
seeing.
a coach is upset, by this, just as well as fans, Charlton. These mistakes are going to be made until these officials are held accountable. That you're going to be suspended for 2 games, 3 games. That is the only way to correct mistakes in officiating.
Yeah.
The suspensions come down to officials.
It has to be. Man, there's so much to talk about. Let's do the Big C timeout, and we'll come right back. I want to finish up getting your thoughts on what happened. That targeting on Lawrence, I think he dipped his head into the helmet. The guy was going to hit him in the chest. That kicked out Ohio State's one of their best defenders. And then Ohio State foolishly calling for a punt block when they were going to get the ball on about midfield anyway. Both of those happened on 3rd downs. We'll take the Big C timeout and come right back in just a second. I can't wait to talk about the second half. All right, we're back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. The apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors on radio and TV. You'll hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. So the hit on Trevor Lawrence was a 3rd down and long. It gave them a 1st down. To me, that was a bad hit. Call a 15-yarder if you want to, but an ejection is ridiculous when the quarterback lowers his head. That's what I saw, and a lot of TV pundits saw it too. But then Ohio State making the mistake also in 4th and 9 to try to block a punt when you're going to get the ball at midfield. You at least get a field goal. That's coaching, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the targeting, I'm all about that. It happened in both games that we saw. We saw players ejected from Oklahoma. We saw players ejected from Clemson. I mean, not Clemson, but Ohio State.
Yeah.
You know what the rules are. Why do you lead with your head? Why do you not lead with your shoulder? You've been taught that all year in practice. So if you lead with your head, being kicked out of the game is the right call by the officials. That's what the shoulder pads are for. They talk about player safety all the time.
Yeah.
One play does not cost the game. It's a multitude of plays throughout the game. And when you make mistakes, that's not coaching, that a player comes in there and leads with his head. He's been told all year. He's been told for the past 2 years. You lead with your head, you're going to be ejected from a game. That's a player going out there trying to make a signature play so he can get on his Instagram account and let everybody know what he did. He can let everybody know from the locker room that he wasn't playing the rest of the game.
That's a very good point. Player safety is also important. Big C, we have the 29-23 Clemson win over Ohio State. I want to get your thoughts going into this big game with LSU and Clemson. I know we have, 13, 14 days to go. But as far as tradition, we're seeing really it's a Southern Football Championship where a lot of the players migrated all over the country. When we had integration and when they ended segregation, players started leaving the South to go to the West Coast and up north. Now it seems like with the way recruiting's going the last couple of years, a lot of players are going back to the South anyway, where they used to be segregation. So we could call this the Fiat Segregation Bowl, Big C, but at the same time, just give me your feeling leading up to it. What gives you the advantage for either team? Your thoughts?
Well, LSU doesn't need an advantage. They are who they are. They are the best team in college football. This team had a 2-week layoff, Charlton, after the SEC championship game where they demolished Georgia. They scored over 50 points in that game. Wasn't even a challenge, Charlton. They came back 2 weeks later to that same stadium, played the Oklahoma Sooners, Charlton, dominated that game also.
Yeah.
So as you look at LSU, their last 2 games, Charlton, have been in a dome stadium with a name on it called Mercedes, okay?
Yeah.
For some reason, that motivates this team.
Yeah.
And when you think about Joe Burrow completing more passes at a percentage rate than any quarterback in college football history, let's just say he's completing 80% of his passes.
Yeah.
Who can play defense against that? As great as Clemson has been defensively, and Trevor Lawrence showed something in this last game against Ohio State that we have not seen, this big 6'6" angular quarterback with mobility that can run, who took the ball under his own arm and said, hey, I'm just a dual threat guy now. I'm not just a pocket passer. I will put pressure on you with my legs, something that I don't think Ohio State was prepared for. And you think about that 62-yard run for a touchdown in the second half, in the second quarter, that changed the momentum of that game.
Yeah.
Ohio State was not prepared for him to run the football.
Yeah.
LSU will look at that differently. They know that he has mobility now. Trevor Lawrence can keep you in a game. Both of these teams, Charlton, are basically playing at home. They're playing Southern football.
Yeah.
This is why everybody looks at the Southern region of the United States as having the best football in the United States. When you go throughout the Southeast, who do we have last year in the national championship game? We had Alabama, we had Clemson.
Yeah.
The year before, we had Alabama, we had Clemson. The year before, we had Alabama, we had Clemson. This year, we have Clemson and LSU.
Yeah.
Two Southeastern region football teams that can recruit nationally, Charlton, as well as keep all the players at home, and they're dominating the landscape of college football.
Yeah.
There's no question to me that Clemson still is the number one team in the country because they won the national championship last year.
Yeah.
They were the runner-up the year before, Charlton. Well, no, they won it the year before also, and now no one has beaten them in 29 games.
Yeah.
So they're looking to have a 30-game run. If they can do a 30-game run, they're repeating again as national champions.
And then Georgia was also in the national title game against Alabama, and that's when Tua came in and did his thing. You know, when thinking about a northern team involved in the national championship game, Big C, it was Notre Dame when they were beaten. I think it was 42-14 by Alabama. That was the last time a team from the north get in. Well, not that true. Ohio State.
The last time a team from the north was when Ohio State beat
Oregon.
Alabama for the national championship. That's the last team in the college football playoffs from the north to participate and win.
Yeah, they beat them in a semifinal, and then it was Ohio State over Oregon in the national championship game. So only a couple of times have we had teams from outside of the South that have even played in the game. That's Oregon and Ohio State, and they played each other, and then also Notre Dame. Outside of that, there have been no other teams that have advanced to the national championship game. Just a couple of things before we get onto the NFL. We can think about winning streaks with Clemson and LSU. 3 times they played the title games previously. In 1958, the Sugar Bowl won 7-0 by LSU after it had been declared national champs by the coaches and media polls. In 1996, the Peach Bowl won 10-7 by LSU, and the 2012 Chick-fil-A Bowl won 25-24 by Clemson on a 37-yard field goal. Notice how I said the Bulls will expand. 1958 Sugar Bowl, 1996 Peach Bowl, 2012 Chick-fil-A Bowl, because those chickens will make a lot of people come. 4 touchdown catches by LSU receiver Justin Jefferson. Big C, that guy's NFL ready, tied for most ever in college football bowl history. 5 of 7 first half completions by Oklahoma quarterback Jalen Hurts, and the first half touchdown passes by LSU quarterback Joe Burrow, respectively. 35, the largest margin of defeat for Oklahoma during Coach Lincoln Riley's tenure prior to Saturday. The largest margin was 11 points against Alabama in the national semifinals. It's just amazing, and that was just last season. The first loss for Ryan Day as Ohio State coach with 16 wins in less than 2 seasons. There's a lot of good stuff to be happy about coming into 2020. There's just so much. I want to get into the NFL, Big C, in the final part of what we're talking about today. Carolina Panthers, Christian McCaffrey becomes the 3rd player in NFL history with at least 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, an outstanding season for Christian McCaffrey, even though this season didn't go the way that the Carolina Panthers were expecting. They lost their starting quarterback, Cam Newton. They lost their head coach, Ron Rivera, with some 4 to 5 games to go in the season. But Christian McCaffrey carried the workload for the Carolina Panthers all year long, becoming only the 3rd back in NFL history, Charlton, to amass those numbers of 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving on the season. And that's the 3rd highest total all time, but he's the 3rd back to do that. Those other 2 backs, Charlton, were fortunate enough to host the Super Bowl trophy. Roger Craig did it with the San Francisco 49ers. Marshall Faulk did it with the St. Louis Rams.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I remember seeing McCaffrey out of Valley Christian High School in Colorado and then going on to Stanford and really showing he broke Reggie Bush's records. You know, he had the ball in his hands so much running and also receiving, just a dominant athlete. Also, the Baltimore Ravens with the number 1 record in the NFL, 14-2. The Baltimore Ravens break Siegel's season team rushing record during Week 17 matchup with the Pittsburgh Steelers, previously held by the New England Patriots, but that was back in 1978 for 3,165 yards. And they did it with a backup quarterback too, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they did it with a backup quarterback, but you think about how impressive their rushing game was all season.
All year, yeah.
This is an offense that made the move last year when they decided to move on from a former Super Bowl winner in Joe Flacco and adjust everything around Lamar Jackson, who all the NFL proponents said should have been a defensive back or a wide receiver, who undoubtedly will be the MVP of the NFL season, who set a quarterback rushing record over 1,000 yards rushing on the regular season, and he also was, helped along by his 1,000-yard running back, Mark Ingram, who came over in free agency from the New Orleans Saints. But this is a testimony to John Harbaugh of how you make an adjustment to the players that are on your roster and you build it around them instead of them fitting a mold that you have previously had.
Yep, that's very true. Jameis Winston, I still like Jameis Winston, Big C, but I think he needs to be fine-tuned. He's like a car that's not running right, but he has everything you need to lead the NFL in passing this year. But Winston, it's a boomer bust season by setting 2 incredible interception records, Big C. Give me your thoughts on Winston with the pick 6 record and the 30 interception record. Man, he just has so much, but sometimes it's just not focused, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about Jameis Winston, you put him in the annals of a baseball player. There's a 30-30 club in baseball where they talk about 30 home runs and 30 stolen bases.
Yeah.
Well, he has that dubious distinction now in the NFL with 31 touchdown passes and 31 interceptions. So that he's in that 30-30 club, and no other quarterback hopes to ever get into that club with him. They want to leave that record to him and him alone. But the 7th pick 6, Charlton, that he threw on the season that cost his team in the final game of the season when he threw that pick 6 to end the game in overtime on the first play. You have to wonder where Jameis Winston's mindset. I think they need to take him to an optometrist because I don't know if he's colorblind or not. Because he throws the ball just as frequently to a defensive back as he does to a wide receiver.
Yeah, sometime when it was Sam Darnold that said he's seeing ghosts, maybe Winston's saying he's seeing ghosts also, Big C. I just think there's so much upside to him, and I just hope that he lands on his feet, Big C. NFL regular season is over, and the coaching, hiring, and firing season is off and running, or you could even say off and passing if you look at Winston, Big C, for the 2019-2020 cycle. Washington Redskins, Jay Gruden, Carolina Panthers, Ron Rivera will land on his feet hopefully before the next month is over. And then Cleveland Browns, Freddie Kitchens, New York Giants, Pat Shermer. Give me your feeling on each one of those players. And there may also be, we know at least a couple of teams are moving stadiums. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it's always a coaching carousel at the end of the season. And 2 of those coaches were gone before the season was over. 2 of them were let go today. The interesting thing about the Giants firing, when you think about the last 2 coaches that have benched Eli Manning, have been fired. By the New York Giants, McAdoo and today with Sherman.
Yeah.
So that's always been something with the New York Giants. You bench Eli Manning, you're going to get fired as a head coach. But that team's problems are deeper than just the head coach, Charlton. This is a team that they kept Dave Gettleman, the general manager, that they're devoid of talent.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder who's going to really want to go in there if you can't put prospects on the field.
Yeah, well, I want to get your thoughts on, before we get into a couple of NFL playoff seedings, coming up with Dallas. This talk that has it happened, has it not happened with Garrett? And I know there's always, this feeling of how do you fire a guy that's been right there knocking on the door of the playoffs? Multiple sources are talking about Garrett meeting with, the Jerry Jones. Give me your thoughts on, I think a lot of people just say get rid of him, but do you feel the same? Is he the wrong fit for the Cowboys, or is it just deeper than that, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, what is the right fit for the Dallas Cowboys? Jerry Jones is the problem with the Dallas Cowboys. As long as you have an owner, GM, / media director and whatever else title that you want to hand on him, Charlton, when you have somebody who's meddlesome all the time and a coach does not have the ultimate power, you're in a lame duck situation in Dallas. People talking about Jason Garrett being fired. He cannot be fired in Dallas. I don't know why anybody keeps thinking that.
Yeah.
He's under contract. Contract runs out in another week.
Yeah.
So it's not like he can be fired. All you have to do is not renew his contract. This happens many times in professional sports, Charlton, that the contract is just not renewed. So Dallas will not fire him, even though talking and meeting with the Jones family, it's just a matter of whether they renew the contract or not.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll just let the air run out, but they didn't say we put a hole in the tire. So we have, that's always, the sports world is a great world. It is a high-pressure world, but it's not really, high pressure when you're making $6 million a year, that's not really high pressure. AFC playoffs, and then the NFC playoffs are set. Before we even get into them, I want to go back to last night's game because the 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks played one of the best football games I've ever seen. It was dominated by the 49ers at halftime. I think they were up 13-0. And in the second half, they outscored them. I think it was by 21 to 7, I believe. So give me your feeling on what happened in that game. And at the end zone call, I think he was about 3 inches short of the goal line, but that wasn't the play that lost it for Seattle. They were down inside the 1-yard line with about a minute to play. Russell Wilson scrambled and found his receiver right about the 1-yard line. And then they ran into beast mode, and they had time on the clock, but they could have just taken a quarterback sneak. I know the theater was there for beast mode to have Super Bowl Part 2, Big C. And then they take a 5-yard penalty on 1st and goal from the 1 with about 30 seconds to play, and they were out of timeouts. Big C, your thoughts?
So why didn't you call it? You said they were out of timeouts. All you got to do is snap the ball and throw it away, Charlton.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Yeah.
That was a coaching blunder in that situation because you should have had the play ready when you got down to the 1-yard line. You don't sit there and wait 15 seconds into the play clock to run a player on the field.
Yeah.
You have to have a regimen of plays. This is what 2-minute offense is all about. If you're not understanding enough of the game at this point, and that comes down to Pete Carroll and even Russell Wilson, this was a dual blunder between the quarterback and the head coach. You have to know what time is on the clock, what you need to do to preserve the time, and neither one of them were able to do that.
No, it was almost like so much noise in that stadium, but like you said, you got to know these things going into it. But there was also a pass interference that was not called. The NFL official out of New York, whoever that guy is, he said it was a pass interference with the Seattle receiver. The defender for the Niners had his back turned to the ball and was actually grabbing him. But Pete Carroll didn't challenge that either. You could have challenged that, and he didn't. I don't understand.
When you're out of timeouts, you can't challenge.
Well, that may explain it too. But even if NFL, if it's under review for the NFL, why wouldn't the NFL say, wait a minute, we can do that, Big C? Your thoughts?
Because you're out of timeouts. The NFL doesn't objectively challenge a play in the last 2 minutes of the game. But this comes down to what we see as a replay. This comes down to what NFL officials see. At any point, you can go back to the booth and look at a play.
Yeah.
But if a team doesn't have a timeout, then they're not going to stop the game to go back in when a flag is not thrown.
Yeah.
So you have to be very cautious of how you take your timeouts throughout the game.
Yeah, it was just an amazing game, an amazing finish. The last 2 times these teams met, it came down to the final play. So the 49ers in the NFC, they clinch home field advantage. They're 13-3, followed by the Packers, also at 13-3. New Orleans is 13-3 on the season. Those are the amazing records for those top 3 teams. And then the Philadelphia Eagles get in by the skin of their teeth, Big C, with a win over the Giants. They're the home field advantage also. And they have the wild card team, Seattle, 11-5, and the Minnesota Vikings, 10-6. The first round bye goes to the 49ers and also the Green Bay Packers. Give me your thoughts on NFC football. Who do you like, Big C?
Well, I mean, this is one of the best tournaments we've seen in NFL history. It's often to see so many teams with double-digit victories. You know, and in Seattle's loss, I think that might have been an advantage for Seattle. They were only 4-4 at home this year during the regular season. All their losses came at home. So they've been a better road team than they have been a home team. The last time they were in Philadelphia, they won. They dominated the Eagles, Charlton. So they're happy about being on the road versus being at home.
Yeah, so 26-21, the 49ers over the Seahawks. And ironically, as you just said, it may have benefited Seattle to go on the road and play in the playoffs because they've lost their last 2 at home, and the 4 of their 5 losses this year came at home, Big C. I just think that's incredible when you look at how that team is shaped up. There's still so much to write home about in the NFL playoffs. Also, when you look at what's happening on the AFC side of the ball, the AFC playoffs are set. The Baltimore Ravens 14-2 with the best record in the NFL. They have home field advantage throughout, followed by Kansas City, which will send New England thank you notes, or maybe they'll send those thank you notes to the Miami Dolphins instead because they bumped New England down to the 3 seed. They're both 12-4, and then Houston's 10-6, Big C. They wrap up the conference champions. And then the wild card, Buffalo is 10-6, and nobody wants to find Henry running the ball at them. They're 9-7, but that good old boy, the way he runs the football, it looks like they may at least win one playoff game, Big C. Give me your thoughts on the AFC.
Well, when I think about Tennessee, they're one of the hottest teams going into the playoffs in the AFC. And when you think about Derrick Henry winning the NFL rushing title, Charlton,
yeah.
Ryan Tannehill having a resurgence in his career, they have 2 outstanding wide receivers. Tennessee is going to be a tough out for New England because Mike Vrabel understands everything that Bill Belichick does defensively.
Yeah.
The team that really nobody wants to see that has gotten healthy and playing tremendous defense is the Kansas City Chiefs. They beat the Baltimore Ravens earlier in the season. And when you have Patrick Mahomes, regardless of the running game that you have, he can score in 2 or 3 plays when he's at offense, and that offense has gotten healthy.
Yeah.
But that defense is dangerous in Kansas City.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good seeing such quality football being played on the last week of the season and even the last game. I would say that most teams were watching the 49ers and the Seahawks until the final second on the clock. That's how good NFL football has been this season. Really looking forward to a lot more. Want to run down just some scores before we close and then get your thoughts and opinion or two in the final 8 minutes on what you're thinking about these teams. Green Bay Packers 23, Lions 20, the Jets 13-6 over the Bills. Dolphins with an improbable win. Swaggy Fitzpatrick 27-24 over New England. Fitzpatrick looked like he was healthier than Tom Brady for a change. Make your thoughts.
Well, Charlton, this is back-to-back years when the Miami Dolphins have won a season-ending game against the New England Patriots on a big play at the end of the game. They have their number. Yeah, they have their number. The Bears 21, Vikings 19. Cousins gets into the playoffs, Big C, but a little bit limping. The Vikings losing that to the Bears. The Chargers, what do you say about the Chargers? The Chiefs 31, the Chargers 21. Will we see Phillip Rivers in a Chargers uniform next year, Big C? Your thoughts? Well, Charlton, it's going to be quite difficult for the Los Angeles Chargers to retain Phillip Rivers. I think they'll go out in free agency, get a quarterback, as well as one in the draft.
The Cincinnati Bengals 33, the Cleveland 23. They had so much hopes of a playoff, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I didn't see any hope for Cleveland at the beginning of the season, Charlton. I said that they would win 6 games on the season. I guess they made me a good bet on that, Charlton, because that's all they won was 6 games.
Yeah.
This was a dysfunctional team. It's not about the head coach. It's about the lack of leadership at quarterback.
Yeah, they've been dysfunctional for a long time. The Saints looking very, very strong, 42-10 over the Panthers. The Falcons 28-22 over the Buccaneers. The Jaguars 38-20 over the Colts. The Eagles 34-17 over the Giants. The Rams with a 31-24 win over the Cardinals. The Ravens 28-10 over the Steelers. The Titans 35-14 over the Texans. And the Raiders, what you say about the Raiders? They lose to the Broncos 16-15, but they did go for 2. Dallas 47-16 over the Redskins. And as we already mentioned, the 49ers 26-21 over the Seattle Seahawks. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on iHeartRadio Podcast as well as Apple Podcast and Google Podcast. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, Roku TV, Apple TV, and Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. And as we always tell you, There's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big City Sports Show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.